There are 5 basic tastes. You've probably heard of them: sweet, salty, sour, bitter, and umami. But there's an incredibly vast world of food and flavors. So what exactly is flavor? And can I, just a regular guy, really figure out how to understand and enjoy food even more than I do? So I talked to some experts, and it turns out that I can. And so can you. But you have to start somewhere. I'm Evan Young, and this is Fever for Flavor. There really is something to be said for that feeling when you've unearthed a kick-ass tucked-away neighborhood bar. One where you can belly up to the rail with your friends, get a beer, watch a Phillies game, and grab a bite to eat. There's something even more unique about that same neighborhood joint when it doubles as a hidden gem of a restaurant, and it has a regularly changing dinner menu driven by complex flavors. That's what I found when I visited Bad Brother, a converted 3-story corner restaurant in the Fairmount section of the city. So I sat down with chef and co-owner Justin Koenig. While the wooden floorboards of the second floor creaked as his staff prepped for dinner, surrounded by an interesting collection of framed pop culture art that secretly appealed to my inner Popeye-loving nerd, Justin and I chatted. We talked about his approach to the dishes and menu at Bad Brother, and it gave me a staggering look into the mind of a detailed and dedicated craftsman, along with a discussion about the surprising intricacies of a Caesar dressing, how to really do zucchini without making it into mush, and one of the most gripping, eloquent, and thoughtful 3 minutes you'll ever hear about a Philly neighborhood chef's template for a perfect burger. All that and more coming next on Fever for Flavor. Justin, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Thanks for letting me into your turf here at Bad Brother. So that's awesome, and I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, very excited. Thanks for thinking of us, and specifically me. Happy to chat. Very excited.
Well, so I'll tell you one thing that made it super easy. I have a couple of friends and some coworkers that live in Fairmount, and whether you know it or not, this place, they love this place. And I'm very happy to report that. And I'm not, no lie. I was I'm going to go talk to the guy at Bad Brother. They were like, holy shit, I love Bad Brother.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. I mean, we try to be, we've always flagged ourselves as a upscale kind of neighborhood spot. And that's kind of, the neighborhood is the target audience. I mean, we're happy to get the outside folks as well, but, we're here mostly for them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you're doing a great job, honestly. And, I wouldn't say that if it weren't true. So if you're trying to appeal to a little bit of a Philly neighborhood local who I think, generally speaking to me, they probably have a little bit of a different palate and maybe one that's a little harder to please, I think you're doing a great job, obviously. So yeah, that's awesome.
That's the business. We're appealing to the person that comes through this door. We can't force anybody to come in here, so we just want to make them as happy as possible.
Cool. So flavor, just thinking about flavor, I really kind of want to dig into how you come at it, just because I think I'm fascinated by your menu for sure. And there's parts of it I would love to, just hear straight from the horse's mouth about. But when you step back all the way, when you're going to create a dish or a recipe or, a drink or whatever it may be that you're offering, do you have a way that you process what that's going to be, taking it from a blank page or just nothing into being what it's ultimately going to be?
I think when you're building flavor, especially on a restaurant menu, you're starting with your nuts and bolts flavors. And this is stuff like, I'm going to sweat garlic. I'm going to mince an onion. I'm going to add, maybe I'm adding booze at some point. Maybe I'm not. At the end, I'm finishing it with, more fresh onion, probably in the form of a shallot. I'm adding butter, which is going to add richness. Maybe I'm finishing a sauce with cream, which is going to add richness. But the true nuts and bolts of it is you're taking your background ingredients and you're bringing your star of the plate to the focal point. How do I make this piece of chicken as delicious as possible? How do I take this zucchini that got dug out of the ground 3 days ago and make that delicious? How do I make that the star of the show? So really, you're taking your background knowledge and your previous experience of these ingredients and you're building your flavor profile around that. And depending on the ingredients, sometimes that's really robust. In some cases, it's not. So I think that's your first line that you're drawing in the sand, so to speak, is how robust can I be? How over the top do I over season this ingredient? And I don't mean that in like a negative sense. Like if I'm seasoning a piece of lamb, I can go yogurt, lemon, mint, and it'll stand up. If I'm going chicken, I mean, that works. In some cases, but maybe it's a really good farm-raised chicken, free range. Maybe I want the flavors to be more subtle. Okay, I roast it with a little bit of butter, some herbs, and I let the chicken come through, not necessarily the rest of the background ingredients. I would say that's step one. From there, you start dialing it in. You want to hit specific parts of the palate. That's, we call that, in the biz, achieving balance. I think that's the other question when I talk to, folks that cook at home, or they're maybe more experienced. Maybe that's a culinary student. Maybe that's your mom, your aunt, your grandmother. You talk about balancing the palate when you're cooking, and you give them like little tips and tricks, and then you go over and you go, Mom, you put way too much vinegar in the gravy. That just needed a splash to kind of balance the richness of the stock, the butter, and the roux, and all that jazz. So I think that's the first thing you're doing. I'm going to add a little bit of acid. There's going to be a little of sweetness. Maybe that comes from something that exists organically in the ingredient, or maybe that's something that I'm adding: sugar, honey, agave, whatever the case may be. And then you're adding, richness, fats. That could be butter, that could be cream, that could be animal fat itself. So it's really just kind of making sure you're touching on every aspect of the palate. And that's kind of how you achieve a balanced restaurant dish. I know that's a very broad description, but that's. I
mean, it's not broad to me. I think
that's kind of how I approach it.
Yeah,
that's how it was explained to me. Like, again, I'm a chef. These are all things that were just passed down to me over generations. I just worked for a lot of really talented people, and now I get to kind of put my own twist on it.
Yeah. So if you're thinking about something like the zucchini, which you just mentioned, I think we all know what a zucchini just tastes like at its base. Nothing added to it or done with it. Is it possible to drive it too far past what we might recognize as zucchini, and to the point where you've sort of ruined it?
You can take any ingredient too far. I think zucchini is a good example, because that's something that got thrown on your table when you were a kid. It got and it was never steamed. It was probably, you probably didn't eat it, honestly.
Yeah.
It was probably mushy.
Yeah.
I think like in that scenario, it's a vegetable that cooks very quickly. So just right off the bat, while texture is not necessarily flavor, it is certainly roped in, because a big part of a fresh vegetable and it tasting fresh is the snap, or maybe the toothsome feel you get when you take a bite out of it. So that that zucchini that was on your plate when you were a kid was probably over-steamed. The water literally took all of the flavor out of that vegetable. Zucchini in general is something that you're probably going to want to dry cook. What I mean by dry cook, you're going to want to roast it. You're going to cook it quickly in a pan. If you do wet cook it, you're going to want to poach it in something that's aromatic. Aromatic liquid, I literally mean taking water or an oil and cooking it slowly and putting other aromatics into it. That could be bay leaf, that could be white wine, that could be garlic, that could be thyme, rosemary. It could be anything that you put into that cooking medium to kind of impart flavor into the zucchini. Circling back, making sure that it takes fresh. You obviously don't want to overcook it, because I think, again, part of a vegetable is you want it to have that snap so that it tastes like it came out of the earth. It tastes like it hasn't been manipulated too much. It's not too far from where it came from. Zucchini is also something that's earthy. So believe it or not, it's something that you could marinate overnight and then just stick it in a cast iron and put a really nice char on it. If your grill's hot enough, it grills really well. It can take that kind of, I'm going to use this is an incorrect term, but it kind of gives it that like Maillard feel that you get when you cook meat. But it's a vegetable that you've just cooked at a really high heat. And the sugars and the starch from the zucchini that exists, because it's an organic matter, they caramelize, and it gives it an almost meaty and an earth forward flavor, which makes it taste like where it came from.
Yeah. So is the science behind any of what you just described something that you think about, or is this just like hands-on learning?
I didn't come from a food first family or anything. When we ate, my grandmother was a tremendous cook, but for the most part, we ate for fuel. I did go to culinary school, but it was very brief, kind of an abbreviated program. So most of this is, trial and error, a lot of hands-on, and just, working for other people that, kind of trailblazed this for me, figured it out for me, and passed it on. So I think you'll find a lot of this stuff is, within the culinary world is borrowed material. There's always, there's only so many geniuses in this field.
I feel like you've definitely achieved some success I mean, your menu, I think, is like what I would say is like pretty diverse for a kind of a corner neighborhood place. You're really doing like different things. Like, just for example, I had the burger the other day. It's not just like a simple burger. It had some complexity to it. There was some different flavors in there that I thought was very cool. So is there a way that you would describe the flavor palette or approach that Bad Brother is taking that you're trying to be?
I think what muddled my flavor palette, I'm not saying muddled in necessarily like a derogatory term. I grew up in a small town on the East Coast. I staged in restaurants in Philly. I worked with some of the really good Philly chefs when I was younger, when I was coming out of culinary school. I was familiar with the restaurant scene, but growing up in Delaware, it's not, I'm not going to say it's not exactly a culinary mecca. So when I moved out to San Francisco, it was like an overwhelming amount of these new ingredients. I was working with folks from Japan, folks from China, folks from the Philippines, people that, straight from Mexico City. And then just their approach to cooking in general, with everything, pretty much having a constant growing season. So it was, for me personally, it was overwhelming, almost to a crippling point. Because it was just so many ingredients that I'd never used or even seen, and really hadn't eaten, to be honest. So it was culinary overload for me. So I had to walk it back into a way that made sense for me. I'm an unethnic human being that grew up in northern Delaware. So a lot of this stuff is foreign to me. So when I take those ingredients, I always circle back to either something that one of these folks that was from a more exotic place of the earth showed me how to do it, and I believed it to be true based on their word, or I incorporated their ingredients into how I was taught to cook. I think going to culinary school, they teach you how to cook French food. That's just what you do in culinary school. Sure, in bigger programs, there's more of a variance in the different techniques and cultures that you're taught. But a 2-year associate's degree, you're cramming it in. 75% of the subject matter is French based. So I always go back to those roots, and I try to go back to dishes that maybe I saw my grandmother cook when I was a kid, and I try to revisit them. And I sneak and I do use the word very purposely. I sneak those flavors into dishes that may appear normal or regular, to a guest that's coming to Bad Brother.
So for any dish that you're working on, how much of your time is spent kind of tinkering and perfecting? And when do you find that the thing is done, or is it not quite ever really done to you?
For me personally, I know some folks will argue or state differently, but for me personally, I do feel a level of contentness when we quote unquote hit the mark. And I think that's more so, us being a neighborhood spot, I try to change the menu very frequently. So I kind of want the food to get on the menu, and I want it to run its course. And I don't want anybody to necessarily get bored with it, because, we have folks that are coming in here 3-4 times a week. And then I'm coming in here 5-6 days a week. So I kind of want it to keep evolving. I want it to be fun for them and fun for me. So for me, I want to get to a finish line, so to speak, with a dish, because I want to get to the next round, especially right now, summertime, where the growing season is locally, at least, is very short here. So I want to, we did zucchini. I want to get to eggplant. I want to get to tomatoes. There's always something that's peeking around the corner. Once I reach the contentness, it's not because I think it's perfect. That would be extremely arrogant. But it's an excitement where I'm like, okay, we did this. That was fun. I like that flavor profile. But there's all these other things. And then, pretty soon it's going to be November, and I'm going to be cooking rutabaga and celery root for 4 months. Not that there's anything wrong with those. It's just a less dynamic growing season.
Do you think that either you yourself or just chefs in general, do you think that they get bored of flavor more quickly than the average person does? It sounds to me like you're not just shaping up or changing up things on the menu for your customers, but also it's all right, I want to keep myself interested.
I think it's important from an engagement standpoint. I know for some people, Bad Brother is very special, and I love that. And it's very special for me too, but in a very different way, in the sense that I have to keep it interesting for me in order to keep it interesting for the guests that are coming in. Otherwise, the menu gets flat, it gets stale, it gets, you can just go somewhere else at that point. We're isolated in the sense that a lot of the really great restaurants in the rest of the city are kind of more central. And then, here we are off in Fairmount. So I guess it's healthy competition. I want to people, in the eating in this neighborhood. Not nothing against all the other restaurants. I feel that I have to change it for myself to stay engaged, to put out a higher quality product, to kind of keep pushing myself, so that, it'd be much easier to just, come in and mail it in, so to speak, never change the menu, same old, same old. I think cooking with changing ingredients keeps you in tune with what it is that you're doing, keeps you focused. I know that probably doesn't make sense. Most people want to settle into a routine, and a lot of chefs do, and I respect that, like, chase for perfection. But for me, I just want to, get a dish to where I want it to be, and then I want to move on to the next one.
Yeah. What you're saying sounds very human and very relatable, right? Because eventually everybody gets bored with the same thing if you do it often enough or long enough. So I don't know. I mean, I understand what you're saying. I don't think that there's anything inherently wrong with somebody in your position saying like, hey, I'm doing this for me too, because, I got to stay engaged as a person, or else I can't deliver you the thing that I think is going to make you happy.
Exactly. And I think we're, specifically myself and Bad Brother, are very lucky that this neighborhood has been kind of very receptive to that. They don't pull my leg too much. Obviously, some people will be upset to see something go, but for the most part, everyone's kind of been very supportive of that program.
Yeah. Do you have any staples on the menu?
We have a couple.
Yeah.
We have just a really good Caesar salad that's kind of carried over from when we were doing our to-go program on the pandemic. I was going to take it off the menu, but I got like so many demands that people were like, this is like, sometimes I just want a Caesar salad. And like, I get that. That's fine. The sriracha wings, I mean, there was that weird sriracha sauce shortage a few years back. So that came off for 7 months, but sriracha wings in their current form have been on the menu since day one. And then the one sandwich that we cannot get rid of, and have been actively trying for I feel like for years now, is our sausage roll, which is just a ground chorizo sandwich that we prepare like very similarly to how a cheesesteak would get prepared. It's just sauces that we grind in house, house scratch made chorizo with queso, and then just some like roasted poblanos and pickled red onions on a seeded Italian roll, and it's a great sandwich. I have a very love-hate relationship with it, though, because it's just kind of been lingering around. But they love it, and so it stays. You got to offer an olive branch every once in a while.
Yeah. No, that's great. I mean, it's interesting. I assume then that the love-hate part of it is just like, man, I would love to be able to move on and do something different.
Yeah, maybe a different sauces, maybe a different region, maybe something, just something different. But it's fun. A little bit of stability.
Yeah,
makes the other side of the creative aspect a little bit more fun, because it's like, all right, I'm just going to channel that energy somewhere else.
Yeah. Can we just like back up to the Caesar salad for a second?
Sure.
Like, I cannot nail a Caesar salad at home, and I don't know what it is. I'm not asking you to like try to tell me how to make one. That's your secret to keep. But like, why is something so seemingly simple like a hard to get thing? And maybe there's a way that applies to just food in general, between what you get when you're out and what you can do when you're home. Is it just simply because other people are making it and that is taken off your own plate at home? Or I don't know, man. Like, that in particular is something that's just like, because I try to do it every so often. like, Jesus, like, what am I doing wrong here?
I mean, I think the elephant in the room, so to speak, is the Caesar dressing itself, right? You're taking something. I mean, you're making an egg emulsion sauce, which is not something, I remember going back to culinary school, and you start getting your introduction to mayonnaise and egg-based dressings, your liaisons, things of that sort. It's just frankly not something that you nail your first time. A lot of broken dressings when you're in culinary school, even like when you're first starting off. I mean, when I was first dialing in this Caesar dressing recipe, there's way too much black pepper in it, completely unbalanced product. So you go back to the drawing board and you say, all right, well, I'm going to half the black pepper, and you go, well, that's not right either. So I think like, in a restaurant aspect, you don't want to waste food, but like you're gonna taste something and you're not gonna be satisfied with it. You're gonna be like, well, I can't charge somebody money for this. This isn't right. So I need to scrap it. And maybe you eat it for shift meal, maybe you eat it yourself, but for the most part, that's gonna go in the trash. And I think when you make something at home, you went out, maybe you only bought a 4-ounce tin of anchovies. You don't have the opportunity to make another batch of Caesar dressing. And then I think Caesar dressing is actually perfect for this conversation because it's something that we've all had everywhere. We've had many iterations of it. It's available, at a Wendy's. It's available at very high-end restaurants. So you've had this overly processed version of Caesar dressing that's like very salt and like dried garlic forward. That's completely devoid of anchovies. And most folks have also had this very pleasant experience with a Caesar salad where there's a gentleman or a lady next to your table and they got the anchovies and the mortar and the pestle or the wooden bowl out.
Yeah.
And I don't think most people are just not going to do that at home because you can buy a bottle of Ken's or whatever your favorite Caesar dressing is and put it out on the table. Whereas here that Caesar dressing recipe has, I have it scratched out in a notepad probably 19 different times where it was tweaked over and over and over again. And some people are anal and are going to do that. But I would imagine that most people are like, I'm hungry. My chicken's ready. I would like to make a salad now.
It's interesting because however we got started on Caesar salad, maybe there's something about it that's a little bit more complex because, like you said, there's so many different ways out in the world that you can kind of render Caesar dressing. Take the idea of somebody making something right next to your table when you're out, like guacamole, right? Like the same thing. I could do a guacamole, guacamole is basically guacamole, unless you tell me I'm wrong. So I don't know. Maybe just some things are hard to replicate well, I guess. And other things, I don't know, maybe they're easy.
I'll keep using Caesar dressing as the example because it's as far as that kind of classic flavor palette that goes, you want something that's perfect balance, in a vacuum, right? It's got to be salty, it's got to be sweet, it's got to have a little bit of umami, it's got to have some acid in it, it's got to have some richness. So a classic Caesar dressing kind of touches on all of those points, and if one of them's not in balance, there's such strong flavors that you can put an extra anchovy or two in your Caesar salad at home, and you're going to insist that you don't like anchovies, and maybe you don't. But when the anchovy is balanced with the sharpness of the black peppercorn, the sharpness of the raw garlic, a little bit of mustard, you put a little bit of pecorino in there, which is salty and rich, and then your lemon juice to kind of balance. You don't taste anchovy anymore. That flavor completely turns itself into something else because the Caesar dressing is the sum of those parts. So it's maybe you don't like fish, and that's fine. But I find that most people who have been eating Caesar salads that don't have anchovies in it are either obviously vegetarian, which is a completely different conversation, or they didn't have a balanced version of what a true Caesar dressing should be. So it didn't, when they ate it, it laid on the palate more strongly in certain areas than other areas.
Yeah. Just as far as palates go, you mentioned, I think your time spent out in San Francisco versus here. Do you think that Bad Brother is really a Philadelphia palate-driven kind of a place? If you were to put it in San Francisco, would you have to make some changes? Or this is a you coming from your heart and your interests kind of place?
I don't know that I would change Bad Brother if it was in San Francisco. I just think that I think Bad Brother at this point, the food menu very specifically is almost kind of how I evolved as a chef. And that includes the 5 years that I was out in San Francisco. And even when I was out there, I got my first chef job, I incorporated things from family, from restaurants from here that I worked in, from chefs that I worked for when I was on the East Coast. So I think Bad Brother is kind of the combination of the two regions that I spent most of my time in, as opposed to being a city-specific restaurant, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. Do you think that sometimes, are there ever occasions where people come in and, they try something and no matter what you feel like you may have done, they kind of miss what you were going for? And then is there a way that you kind of, adjust things on the fly to address that? Or, can that ever be a frustration for you?
It's human nature when you produce something and you spend time on it and somebody's not a fan of it or they don't like it. I think it's gonna be frustrating, but I think you also all of our flavor palettes are so vastly different. Yeah. There's some people who are super picky about what they eat, and that's totally fine. So I think it's something that when somebody comes back and they're like, oh, table such and such, didn't really care for this. Kind of have to kind of put yourself in their position. You can't think about that particular instant like as if you're a chef at that point. We all have different palates. It's not that I don't like spicy food. It's just a flavor profile that I personally don't care for. And it's a flavor profile that I dive into as a chef. But when I go out, I avoid that flavor profile. So if I'm going to do that, when I go out to eat, I try to remind myself that I can't, hold that against a guest that didn't like what I put out, because we're all different. We're all going to like different things.
I feel like sometimes I'm like easy to please when I go. Like I almost roundly enjoy everything when I go out to eat. I mean, I think part of it is because like I'm not doing it myself, which is amazing. I just get to get up and walk out. I've got kids at home, a family at home, and just the act of putting dinner together and cleaning up is like, so it's great to like go out. And unless the food is just like really missed, then I'm likely to be like, oh yeah, that was either good to very good, but. Now, I'm curious, like how much do you feel like you want to kind of react to what you're hearing from your customers in the moment? Or do you feel like, hey, you know what, I'm more likely to hear people when they're not as happy as and I know some people are probably, they love it, but they're not, speaking up. Do you just kind of have to be like, you know what, this is what I'm doing. I know what I'm doing. Things are trucking along pretty well.
You can't be arrogant about it. You'll be out of business very quickly if you take like a totalitarian kind of approach to like this is what I do. And like I guess we touched on it earlier. We had staples. Like I don't necessarily want that Caesar salad to be on the menu, but a lot of people that come into Bad Brother do want that. So that's kind of that's kind of a battle that you kind of fall on your sword, so to speak. Like I don't want to necessarily make 70 some sausage rolls a week, but like that's they like that. And that's for them. So I think you find balance within your menus. Like I'm gonna listen to the picky guest because I want the picky guests to come in here. I want them to feel welcome here. This isn't like some kind of food temple. This is a neighborhood restaurant. I want everyone to feel comfortable. I'm more receptive, unfortunately, to the negative feedback. I'm always going to take that more to heart, and that's like the information that I'm going to take, and I'm going to try and like I take that as a challenge almost. Like, all right, I'm going to like when somebody tells me they don't like an ingredient. I like the first time I cook for them, I sneak it in. And the best example of this is I cook for my mom every year on Mother's Day and for her birthday. So twice a year I go down to Delaware and I cook for my mom, and I'll sneak ingredients that I know for a fact that my mother has in the past said that she does not like, and I'll sneak them into the meal, whether that's first it was mushrooms, and I was like, oh yeah, but like, what if we put some caramelization on it? We had some booze in here, and like we flambe them a little bit with some like garlic and shallots and some thyme and rosemary. Do you like them now? And she's just like, those were mushrooms. Yeah. So I think for that, like, if I do something in the dish is bad, I'll probably get to that conclusion before it hits the table.
Yeah.
I would like to think. I hope so. That's the goal anyway. But then if you say like, I didn't like this dish, I didn't like this flavor, then I'm doing my job. I have to ask you why. How did we get there? Was it something that I misprepared? Was there, like I said, was it unbalanced? Did I not put enough acid in the dish? Was there not enough salt? Was it bland? Was it overspiced? Did you want to taste more of the natural ingredient, its natural form? Did I go too far? So I think you're kind of playing detective at that point. So you're going to talk to that guest, and then you're going to say, all right, thank you. Please come back next time. I'll have something different for you. And you take all that information and you kind of put it into your flavor palette.
Do you think that other folks that work with you would describe you as a perfectionist, or do you find yourself forcing yourself to leave some of that aside because you would just go nuts trying to please or satisfy everyone?
Perfectionist to a certain extent. I like the way my mind works. I think sometimes can be tough for other folks to follow. I'm personally not the most like organized person. I refuse to get a computer. So like when I hand somebody a recipe, it's on a clipboard yeah. in my horrible handwriting. But I think I'm a perfectionist in a sense is like when we sit down as a group and we're putting a dish on the menu and I say, hey, this is how I want this to taste. This is how I want this to look. This is how long I want this cooked. This is the ideal temperature we're going to cook the protein to. I do not deviate from that. That's where the perfectionist kind of mindset comes in. Like, hey, folks, ladies, gentlemen, we talked about this. We know how this dish is supposed to look. Like this is in my mind this is the perfect rendition of this current plate of food. And I'm very strict in that sense. I'm perfectionist in terms of, you know, like what's a perfect plate of food look like? I think at some point as you mature as a chef, unless you're like chasing Michelin stars or you're really, you know, you're going for a James Beard, I think at some point you accept that, like, okay, I just need to make food taste really good. And that's not always necessarily perfection, because then there's other things that come into that. And like I said, I don't want that to come across in like a negative light. I think there's chefs that are flavor driven, and then there's chefs that are technique driven, and then there's chefs that are the combination of the two. I fall somewhere in the middle of the spectrum. I consider myself to be a very good tactician in what I do in my execution, but I'm chasing flavor. So, you know, maybe the green sauce on the plate's not super neon green, but it is, I can assure you it's delicious, if that makes sense.
Totally. Yeah. So one of the things I'm curious to get your take on too is where the line is between simplicity and then complexity, but then like over complexity. So I had a conversation with a friend of mine a long time ago up in New York, and he's like, you got to go to this burger place. It's the best burger in New York. So I'm like, all right, I'm curious. This is this guy's, you know, my buddy's like definition of best burger in New York. And we tried it. And for him, that definition was the most simplistic. It was literally a bun with some cheese and the burger, and that was it. But for me, and you'll be curious to hear this, I think, this place was described as the Royal Tavern of Fairmount to me.
Interesting.
I always have thought their burger is like awesome. So when I tried your burger the other day, and again, I'm not a food critic, please, by any means, but I thought it was great. But I would never describe it as like what my friend up in New York described as like, he just wanted like the straightforward thing. I thought what you had was like interesting and complex, right? But without going overboard. So like, do you find that you're always kind of walking that line with something as like a burger is like a very defining thing for a restaurant or any other kind of dish? How do you walk that line between like, I just want to get the simple thing down versus I really want to make it this other thing?
I think there is a like very like definable template for the perfect burger. And for me, that varies from person to person. Some people want a piece of cheese, a bun, maybe some onion, maybe a pickle, done. Some people insist that it must have sauce. I'm on that side of the fence. Like perfect burger for me, I think of like that backyard burger when you were growing up. So for us, there was mayonnaise, there was shredded lettuce, there was a piece of probably out of season tomato and some onions that were cut way too thick, and then a couple like Clausen dill pickle chips. Yeah. That's the perfect template for me. That's the burger I grew up eating. Yeah. So I use that burger template as the inspiration, and I import, you know, seasonal ingredients into that, because it doesn't, like, the tomato is there to provide moisture, in my opinion. And maybe it's a really good tomato, so maybe it's a little bit of sweetness and there's a little bit of acid to it. But for the most part, it's just something wet on top of the burger. Like, let's break it down to its core. So for the burger that's on the menu specifically, we take zucchini, we cut it into planks, and we grill it with beef fat. The beef fat goes into the zucchini. And the zucchini basically becomes the tomato component on the hamburger. I think for me, that's very easy to get there laterally. The smoked eggplant mayonnaise is just my take on the mayonnaise. The reason why the eggplant is smoked is just because I wanted to impart a smoky flavor. I wanted to use flavor as like a memory tool in this case. So I wanted the burger, we don't have charcoal back there, we don't have any open fire, so I wanted something to kind of emulate the like smokiness that you would get from a burger that was cooked too long on charcoal or over wood too long. So the only reason why the eggplant is smoked is to impart that flavor without just dumping a bottle of liquid smoke into the mayonnaise, because that's not something that I would personally do. And then there's just an onion component on there, right? We just have some marinated onions that probably on their own have way too much red wine vinegar in them, but when you eat it on top of the burger, it balances the zucchini. And then, you know, you just want, at this point, I'm just looking for a cheese that melts. I'm trying to replicate a Kraft single. We'll go mozzarella. It melts well. It's a little salty. It's going to bring everything together. And then a lot of rich ingredients, right? Fresh basil kind of just breaks everything up, kind of like backs the onion back a little bit, makes everything else on the burger tastes a little bit more salty, tastes a little bit more rich. And then you got to get a really good bun, you got to get a really good patty. So yeah, Happy Valley Meats, you know, Lost Bakery, it's pretty. That's how I get there. That's the template. That's my perfect burger. I just move the parts around as I see fit.
Everything you just said, I think, first of all, like blows me away. But like you're clearly thinking about it on a level that, I mean, I would love to just understand better, right? Because everything you described is exactly what I ate. It's awesome. But hearing you talk about it, like this is not just like a casual take on a burger. You're hitting a level of, I think, depth and thoughtfulness and detail that was reflected in what I ate, which is awesome, you know? So like kudos to you. I think that's great.
Thank you.
Yeah. And also, you know, I think what is interesting is like, and you know, maybe it's a little bit of a Americana, right? But like, you know, a burger in itself is kind of like a measuring stick, I think, for a lot of bars, right? And I don't know if this is my impression. Maybe that's not a right or wrong one, but like, what do you think about that? Is it like, hey, I know people are going to come in here and that's like the first thing they're eyeballing on the menu, and I want to make sure I do that right?
Yeah, I think that's why, I mean, I'll call it like taking liberties. I think that's why I kind of do get expressive within the burger.
Yeah.
Because I want people to come in here and be like, this place is a little different. And it's a little bit different in a good way. At least I would like to think so. There's nothing wrong with that, you know, standard, you know, burger, cheese, bun ratio. It's great. It's fantastic. I love that. I eat that all the time. But like when people come here, I want to be like, all right, this is a little bit, maybe it's just a little bit more thought about. It's just another vessel for creativity for me, and another way to, like, again, I would say argue that, again, I don't know why zucchini keeps coming up. I guess probably because it's the middle of almost the end of July and it's everywhere.
Yeah.
But like, a lot of people are going to be like, I don't like zucchini, and I'm going to be like, you sure? Try it like this. Think of it as a component of a cheeseburger and not just a pile of steamed mush, you know, next to your fish or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, I think it's important. I mean, if I'm going to a place for the first time and I'm even slightly sketched out or vaguely unfamiliar with the place, that's where I start. I get a burger. Is it cooked properly? How does it taste? Is there enough salt on it? Is it, you know, are the fries edible? You know, if I got a side salad, was the salad dressed? Did you chop herbs into the salad? You know, what level of detail are you applying? And that's, I think, a very easy place for people to start because it's approachable.
Yeah. For me personally, too, one thing I've found interesting the last few years is I've gotten a little bit older when I was in my 20s or whatever, I'm like, I'm going to hit a bacon cheeseburger and not even think twice about it. Nowadays, though, it's like, all right, maybe I don't want the bacon. I mean, I'm not choosing a burger because it's healthy by any means, but like if there's a way to do it where it's not slathered in all the stuff that they tend to be kind of slathered in, I'm going for that. You know, one of the other things I was like thinking too is that when people come in here, do you have a hope for what you want them to be paying attention to most when it comes to the different dishes that you're making? And then like, how do you kind of keep track of that?
Well, there's really only one way to keep track of it, and you have to hope the server, which they do here, comes back to you and says, you know, table X really, really like this dish, and then you hope that they ask the follow-up question, which, you know, we're a busy restaurant. Sometimes that conversation doesn't always happen, but that's what you're looking for. That's how you know, canvass the neighborhood, so to speak. You know, your server's not just serving that guest; they're acting as a liaison between, you know, myself and the guest. I can't touch every table that comes in here. I still work the line, so that's how we gather information as chefs. You know, sometimes you hear it from the horse's mouth. You touch a table, somebody request a table visit from the chef, and you get to talk to them directly. But for the most part, you get a little report back from the servers and bartenders. I think, like, as far as this place, like, what I really want people to appreciate is we spend a lot of time. I call it like my philosophy. I call it layering flavors, and what I mean by that. And I worked for a chef years ago. When I was in Delaware, and he told me, he said when you want something that tastes like something, you put the something everywhere, and that's what kind of clicked for me in my brain, and that's what made it make sense. So when you're using an ingredient, whether it's, you could take something as simple as a lemon, right? You have the zest, so you want to incorporate the zest into the dish. So maybe it's a fish dish, and you take the lemon zest, and you give you a little bit of olive oil, and you marinate the fish in the lemon zest, and you let it sit for a little bit, or maybe you put it in a vacuum seal bag, whatever you feel that piece of fish could stand up to. And then you think about the juice and you're like, all right, well, maybe I'll take the juice and I'll make a sauce with it, or I'll make a vinaigrette, or I'll make a citrus forward beurre blanc, or maybe I'll just, depending on the piece of fish, maybe I'll just take the lemon juice and just squeeze it over the top of the finished dish, like when you're eating crabs or something like that. And then there's another aspect of that lemon where you could leave the zest on, and then you could salt it and you could ferment it in a process that's very popular in like Japanese cuisine. Like you make like a kosho type thing. So you're taking this, and by using the entire ingredient is an easy way to make sure that you're layering the flavor. And now I have the citrus oil, I have the citrus juice, and I have this like salty, bitter pith component. And you incorporate those into the dish, and that creates, when you eat the dish, you're like, your brain registers that as like, oh wow, that's like really balanced lemon flavor. That's like really, really tasty. So that's kind of the underlying philosophy. And like when people eat something here, I want them to notice that like we finished the vegetables with some chopped fresh herbs just to give them a little bit of brightness. I want them to notice that we sweated out some garlic and shallot every time we picked up something in a pan, like every time we were building a sauce. I want them to notice like the depth of the flavor that we incorporated it, because that's where the magic comes here. Because at the end of the day, we're a neighborhood spot. We're putting a plate of food in front of you, and it's not that we're like slinging slop out of the kitchen here by any stretch of the imagination. But at the end of the day, I'm putting a plate of food in you, so I want you to see the depth. I want you to know that we put a lot of time into it, and I want you to taste like the depth of each ingredient that we used, because that's a focal point for me. That's pretty much my whole philosophy as a chef, is how can I take this something and make it taste like that something.
Do you think that a lot of people may either consciously or subconsciously like recognize the layering that's happening? How many people do you think are really like, oh, okay, so this is what he's done here. He's used the different parts of the lemon. He's finished it this way. Or how many people are just kind of like, that was great. I don't quite know why, but there was something happening there and they can't identify what it is that you've done.
We're a food city. I think there's a lot of very educated diners, but I still think a vast majority of people go to restaurants and they know that they liked the food and they had a great time and it was delicious and it was seasoned well, and they know that they liked it, but maybe not necessarily why. And I think that's like the magic of going out to eat, is I think a lot of people choose to, like, there's certain foods that when I was growing up and like when I was a young cook, I never wanted to work in a Japanese kitchen, and not because I'm like anti like Japanese food or anything like that. And I do use like Japanese ingredients from time to time, but I never wanted to pick up on any of that technique. And that was a conscious choice that I made because I liked going out for sushi so much. And I just wanted that to be a magical kind of experience for me. Like, oh, this is so good. It's a piece of fish over rice with some garnishes. I don't understand why this is so delicious. I just know that I really like eating this. So for me, that was like a conscious decision. And like, I'm sure I understand the basics, but I never wanted to really learn the ins and outs of that specific cuisine because I eat Japanese food so often. So I think for some folks, there's probably a little bit of a illusion or a magical kind of element to it where they're like, I just know I really enjoy this and I don't necessarily want to dig under the hood. Yeah. And then I think sometimes, and I'm guilty of this, I think, my mom will watch me cook when I like cook for her, and she'll be like, why are you doing that? And I'll be like, oh, well,
past, Mom.
I'll be like, oh, well, it's gotta be this small for this reason, or I'm putting it at the end so it doesn't lose all of its flavor. And she's like, you can't just throw it in the pot. I'm like, well,
you're like, Mom, I got this.
Sure. Of course you can just throw it in the pot, but like, go sit down.
That's great. That's funny. Did you say you were French by background?
I just think a culinary school makes you makes like ingrains in it that you always revert back to your French technique. You pretty much. I mean, I've start 80% of when I'm cooking something. I without even thinking about it, I dice an onion, I mince a shallot, I mince some garlic, I chop some herbs. I use wine often. I just think that's something that, when you in culinary school, that's what they teach you. That's day one. That's what they call cooking fundamentals.
I grew up in a Italian household. My mom, same deal, like phenomenal, home chef, self-taught with everything, but she would just make amazing stuff. She probably should have been a chef back in the day. And that's the reason why, like, if I go out to eat, I'm not going to like Italian restaurants these days, because I got some very good Italian stuff at home. But Yeah, I don't know if I could ever make anything around her though, because I think it would be a little bit like what you said. Like, what are you doing with that? You should be doing this.
Yeah.
It's like, all right.
Yeah, I think it's more like with my mom. I think it's more like a curiosity, not an intrusiveness. Or
Yeah.
she'll tell me that I'm like too fussy. Like, all right, yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
But you're off tonight, Mom.
Yeah, no, that's nice. That's cool. You make dinner for her. So, for you here, do you think that there's like kind of an undiscovered country in the world of what you do as a neighborhood restaurant that you think has even like yet to be uncovered by people?
I think there's another level to this, strictly from just the simple fact that we're only open for dinner. I mean, obviously there would be like a whole lunch menu to explore in that scenario. But I think like as Bad Brother exists right now, I'm very happy with it. I think a second location would be much more viable than expanding here, just personally. Just another building to kind of make into your own, expand the brand, kind of like share philosophies. I mean, we're only a 14, maybe 15 person staff, you know what I mean? So you want to kind of start putting your agents out into the world, so to speak. So you want to bring in as many people as possible.
For Bad Brother or any restaurant, as far as like a brand goes, how much of that brand do you believe is the flavor part of it, which I think like clearly you're intimately concerned with and care about, and how much of it is the decor or the experience or any one of these other pillars of what any restaurant has to do?
Well, this restaurant specifically has a very certain vibe because it's a 3-story old Philly townhouse that has kind of been scraped out. So this restaurant in my head exists and it has 3 completely different vibes to it. The bar gets so loud, and the food that people order at the bar is much different than the food that people order in the dining room, and it all comes out of the same kitchen, which for me is so fun. But it is like if you sit at the bar and you sit in the upstairs dining room, it's you do what we have been told by guests that have done both, that it's like sitting in 2 completely different restaurants.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's cool though. I mean, and different, like the way you just described. Because if I'm going to come watch a Phillies game or an Eagles game, my mindset in that given moment is not food oriented, right? It's like I'm going to get a beer, like you said, maybe eat something, but then if I'm coming out for a dinner, and I mean, totally different thing up here, which is also like, to me, those 2 things can exist at the same time, and I could be totally happy as a customer. So for my last question here, like if you had to just live without one of the tastes, sweet or sour or umami, or for the rest of your life, which one of those would you live without?
Man, it's a big one. I have a sweet tooth personally, so that has to stay. Because I eat so much sweet stuff and I like it so much, I have to keep acid. You got to have some balance in your life. This is going to be a controversial type because I feel like it's a very like anti-chef propaganda type thing. I'm going to go umami.
Okay.
I don't need to dip my sushi in soy sauce when I go out. I'm glad that the anchovies are in Caesar dressing, but I don't necessarily think I would miss them if they were gone, just because I would prefer the other flavor profiles. I'm going to go umami. I like pecorino. I like salty, stinky Italian cheeses that are a little bit funky, but I think you could replicate those in the aggregate if you really took your time to kind of reconstruct them. I think that's the one I'm going to take out, because I think that's also the one that's the most difficult to kind of muster. It's still, when people are trying to explain it, most folks can't explain exactly what umami means, and we all have our own personal definition of what that word means. I mean, even chef to chef, you go down the line, and there's some people who argue that ingredients firmly belong under that umbrella. Others will taste the same ingredient or use the same ingredient and say, no, that's not what that word means. I see that a lot with, I think the most common example is like Italian cheeses. Like those the ones that you usually grate, kind of like, they do have like essence of umami for sure. They do the same thing to your palate. They have a very I don't want to insult years of tradition, but like in a vacuum, they do have like notes of like MSG in them.
Sure,
if you
yeah.
like close your eyes and taste them side by side, you could see how people get there and call it umami. But that's the one I'm scratching.
Yeah. And this may be completely wrong. I honestly have no idea because I'm not trained, but it feels to me like umami is the least complementary of all of them. Like, you can kind of take it and put it on its own little island, but like you said, you can mix salty and sour and sweet in all kinds of different ways, and they're going to complement each other based on what you're doing. But umami kind of like it's to me, I don't know, it's kind of out there, you know?
Yeah, it's probably the most intrusive as well. You know, I think, you know, one extra dash of soy and something is inedible. Too much, you know, like it's like miso, like that flavor profile is very obtrusive if you're not, you know, balancing it properly. So I think we're firm. I think I'm firmly not anti-umami, but if we had to get rid of one, and again, this isn't like a crusade against umami. I'm just saying if we had to get rid of one, that's going to be my choice.
There you go. Well, that's the question. You know, it's designed that way to make sure that we get a good take. So, yeah. Awesome. Well, Justin, thank you so much.
Thanks a lot for having me.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. I mean, it's like super interesting. You know, best of luck with Bad Brother. You guys are doing something really cool here. So thank you.
Really appreciate that.
Thank you for joining us on Fever for Flavor, a weekly podcast hosted by me, Evan Young, and produced by Studio D Podcast Production. If you want more content, go to feverforflavor.com. That's fever, the number 4, flavor.com. Feel free to email us at podcast@feverforflavor.com and follow us on Instagram @feverforflavor. Again, that's fever, the number 4, flavor. If you'd like to support Fever for Flavor, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. All you have to do is open up the podcast app on your phone, look for Fever for Flavor, scroll down until you see Write a Review, and tell us what you think. Join me next week as we continue to explore the world of food and flavors here on Fever for Flavor.